Thank you. Good evening to you. Coming up on the programme. Remember the fire that forced Heathrow to shut down in March? An investigation finds it was caused by a preventable fault at the electricity substation owned by National Grid, which was first discovered 7 years ago.
I am just absolutely amazed that such a critical and actually quite a large part of our critical national infrastructure in the National Grid was not properly maintained for 7 years.
Heathrow is now considering legal action against National Grid. Also tonight. How much of the £39 billion earmarked by the government for social and affordable housing is coming to London? Plus,
bars and pubs across the capital stand ready for the big kick-off. Euro 2025 is underway. Can the Lionesses defend their title?
When did you sort of realise that, the sound was beginning to sort of gel and that, you had something?
After about a year and a half.
Their first TV interview back in the 90s, ahead of Oasis playing at Wembley this month. BBC Radio London's Gary Crowley reflects on meeting the Gallaghers.
I could lie and say when I watched that video that I foresaw, Noel and Liam and Oasis were going to become one of the biggest bands in the world, but I didn't.
Hello and a very warm welcome to the programme. First tonight, remember the fire that forced Heathrow to shut down in March? Well, today, an official report pulls no punches in its assessment of what caused it, saying there was a catastrophic failure of equipment caused by a lack of maintenance and that National Grid, which owns the substation, had been aware of the fault since 2018 and that numerous opportunities to fix issues were repeatedly deferred. Heathrow is now considering legal action. And the energy watchdog Ofgem says it will investigate. Here's our transport correspondent, Tom Edwards.
This fire at North Hyde electricity substation crippled Heathrow, and today a damning report blamed a catastrophic failure of equipment. And it highlighted multiple errors by the substation operator, National Grid. Crucially, a problem with moisture raised 7 years earlier was not acted on.
I think the story of the report really is about a series of missed opportunities, a series of missed opportunities to find, fix and repair the fault on the transformer that ultimately went on fire.
Basic maintenance at the site in 2022 was also deferred by National Grid. Also in that year, the fire suppression system was deemed inoperable.
Our members who work in the networks tell us that the focus is on new connections rather than maintenance because that's more profitable for the companies. But it comes at a cost, as the report today has shown.
No electricity meant Heathrow had to shut down for safety reasons. Thousands of passengers were left stranded, and thousands of homes were also left without power locally.
I think this is a point where the board have got to pause and think quite carefully. There are real concerns now in the business community around the basic governance of the organisation. At the moment, they're expecting to get their new chief executive in place in November of this year. We're wondering whether they need to be brought on board a lot faster.
The report also said that Heathrow Airport relied too heavily on one power outlet, and this was the response in Parliament.
I am just absolutely amazed that such a critical and actually quite a large part of our critical national infrastructure in the National Grid was not properly maintained for 7 years, and that Heathrow, the busiest airport in the world, had a single point of failure.
The resilience of our electricity system is incredibly robust. We need to do everything we possibly can to make it even more robust, and particularly for incidents like this to not have quite such a significant impact as they did on the 20th of March.
Today, the airport said the report showed the substation operator had failed. It is now considering legal action. National Grid said it had inspection and maintenance programmes in place and that it had taken further action since the fire. But there are still big questions over how maintenance failures were allowed to happen and close key national infrastructure. Tom Edwards, BBC London.
Good to have you with us this Wednesday. Plenty more ahead, including the relationship between graffiti and the capital. We hear from a London artist who's also spent time with Banksy. Today, we got further detail announced on how the government plans to address the housing shortage in the capital. Of the £39 billion earmarked for social and affordable homes nationally, just under a third, that's £11 billion, of that will be spent in London over the next decade. Our work and money correspondent Megan Owen can tell us more. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Riz. Well, yes, the government plans to build 300,000 new affordable and social homes in the next 10 years. This will be a mix of different types of housing for sale and for rent for people whose needs aren't being met by the private market. We now know that 180,000 of these, so 60%, will be social homes. That's low-rent homes for those on low incomes. And as for the remaining 40%, well, we don't yet know what that will consist of. Now, this is particularly important for the capital, which is, as we well know, facing an acute housing crisis, with 1 in 49 Londoners living in temporary accommodation whilst they wait for social housing. I've spoken to some of them today who tell me that they need immediate help. So how much of that funding will be going to London? Well, we're told a 30% share of it, so up to £11.7 billion out of £39 billion over 10 years. Now, the Mayor has welcomed the funding, saying that this is the biggest and longest the capital has ever received. But he also stresses that there's still a long way to go to fix the housing crisis in London. He says he will continue to work closely with the government to secure even more national support to help build the level of new housing that London needs. But on that note, will this level be met? Well, earlier I spoke to David Simmons, Shadow Minister for Housing and Local Government.
The feedback from the development sector, from the builders, from the suppliers of building materials, from across the skills sector, is that this is a difficult, if not impossible, challenge. We've seen a big reduction in the number of new homes being built since the general election last year. The employers who bring all those skills together tell us that the big rise in business taxes has been a problem for recruitment, and that's reduced investment as well. So something very significant is going to have to change.
Well, experts say that these housing targets will be difficult to meet. That's because of a shortage of construction workers, stricter housing regulations post-Grenfell, and housing associations not able to buy new stock because of their investment in repairing existing properties. Well, next week, the Housing Committee will be scrutinising these plans. It's been a busy day in Westminster, but this announcement hasn't gone unnoticed. Riz.
OK, for now, Megan, thank you. Megan Owen there. Let's turn now to some of the day's other news stories. A Bridgerton actress has moved out of London after having her phone stolen in Kensington. Genevieve Shenner says the incident left her feeling unsafe. 18-year-old Zachariah Bulares was sentenced yesterday to 22 months in jail for common assault and 3 counts of theft. 8 people have been arrested in a coordinated Metropolitan Police operation across London, targeting people conspiring to destroy ULEZ cameras. Arrests took place in Uxbridge, Ickenham, Northwood, Sutton and Eltham. 6 men and 2 women were arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit criminal damage. And the Royal Academy of Music is planning to open a new East London campus, which it says will provide endless possibilities for students. Work should start in spring next year. It'll be the first major addition to the Royal Academy since the creation of its current home in Marylebone in 1911. Next, as we approach the 20th anniversary of the 7/7 London bombings, a day that changed the capital forever, we're hearing from some of the emergency crews who were the first on the scene of a series of attacks on our transport system, killing 52 people and injuring hundreds more. Tonight, Peter Rhodes, who was the first paramedic on the scene of the bus explosion in Tavistock Square and only 6 months into the job at the time, shares his story.
There was a contact from our control room to say that there had been an explosion on a bus, and would I respond to that, because the other cars in the area had been responding to the stations.
BBC London. With a summary, I'm Max Rushton. Good morning. The Metropolitan Police say there have been explosions in multiple locations in London.
Underground and major rail networks are going to be disrupted. They are closed.
There were quite a few people who just didn't understand what had actually happened. There were people actively doing things to help people who were on the ground. Quite a lot of people. By the time I got there, I can picture it to my left. There was the BMA building, so the British Medical Association building, which was then full of doctors. They'd taken in quite a number of people from the bus who were able to get in there. It's quite strange, really. It was really quiet. I remember it being really quiet. There were lots of people, but there was a strange silence around it, which is that's the thing that I remember the most about it, was just how quiet it was actually out in the square, with either people just disbelieving what they'd seen happen in front of them, and the people who were making noise had been moved away from it. So it was a really strange scene in that sort of a way. It's really clear to me that something had exploded on this bus, and this bus had been blown apart by something that exploded on it. There was no other explanation as to what had actually happened around it. And it was just awful in terms of there were clearly people on the bus who had died and there was nothing that could be done for them. There were clearly people who were outside the bus who died and there was nothing that could be done for them. So there were sort of people and bits of people around, right the way around. And although you can train for these sorts of things, actually arriving and seeing it firsthand and seeing it first time, and just understanding that the people there are relying on you to do your best and to be able to sort of get a grip of the situation and what's happening on the situation as well. It's quite a thing. I certainly remember one person that I saw where I saw them and talked to them and then came back to them later on and they had sadly died. And I remember that person well. Actually, I can picture exactly where they were and almost exactly what they said. And they were getting the care they needed, and were really quite significantly injured by this. And I'm not sure there's anything that would have made a difference, but I do remember those things where there were people who were there and people who had subsequently sadly died. No one prepares you for the sight of it, the smell of it, the silence of it. I was going to say the noise of it, but actually it wasn't the noise of it, it was the silence of it. All of those things you think are going to be there but just aren't there. But actually the principle is there, which is that finding the people who need to be helped, making sure they're getting the most immediate aid you can do, and doing the best for as many people as you can do. That principle is there right the way through.
That was Peter Rhodes, who was the first paramedic at the Tavistock Square bombing, sharing his memories and reflections. And ahead of the 7/7 anniversary on Monday, we'll be hearing other stories from those who were there that day 20 years ago. You're watching BBC London. Still to come tonight before 7. We look back at the Gallagher brothers' first TV interview ahead of Oasis playing at Wembley later this month. OK, let me take you back to the summer of 2022. And yes, the Lionesses finally brought football home. Just look at their faces, a wonderful moment. 3 years on, they're attempting to do it all over again. The defending champions play their first match on Saturday, but Euro 2025 kicks off this evening. In fact, straight after us here on BBC One. Across the whole tournament, there'll be no shortage of venues showing the matches on big screens. Well, we can join our sports reporter Chris Legg at one of them now. Good evening, Chris.
Yeah, it is the official opening game, as you say, straight on after our programme. Bizarrely, as sometimes happens now at the Olympics and the Euros, the first game is actually happening right now. Finland leading Iceland in the closing stages. Casual viewing here, I would say, at the Greenwood Sports Bar, but excitement is going to pick up over the next few days as England prepare to kick off on Saturday against France. And we hope that we get a chance to relive those scenes, that glorious summer of Euro 2022. Leah Williamson, the captain of London Talent, on show. More than half of the likely starting 11 play for clubs in the capital. 3 Arsenal players, and they've just been crowned, of course, European champions at club level as well. Beth Mead in the team, who was the top scorer and the best player at Euro 2022. The England captain, defender Leah Williamson, and also Alessia Russo, who scored the goal of the tournament at Euro 22 with that cheeky nutmeg back heel against Sweden in the semi-final. And also 3 Chelsea players likely to start, and they've just won a domestic treble. Now, you've got to be quite some goalkeeper to displace Mary Earps, and that is what Hannah Hampton has done. At right back, you've got Lucy Bronze, the only England player ever to be crowned World Player of the Year back in 2020, and Kira Walsh as well, an unsung hero, arguably the most important player in Serena Wiegmann's team, probably the first name on the team sheet in midfield. It is going to be harder this time round for England. No England team, men or women, has ever won a major tournament beyond these shores, and Spain are the favourites. They, of course, beat England in the World Cup final in 2023, and it's a really tough group. We can look at the fixtures now. It starts for England on Saturday evening when they will take on France. France actually beat England in the qualifiers, although England did also beat France in the return game. And then next Wednesday, another really difficult game. Serena Wiegmann takes on her home nation, the Netherlands. They also beat England in 2023, though again England did get revenge in the other fixture. And then when it comes to a week on Sunday and the group stage concludes, England will be heavy favourites because Wales have never got to a major tournament before. They are the lowest ranked team in these finals, but they will be desperate to put one over on, of course, their neighbours. So, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating group stage. The top 2 in the group will make it through to the quarter-finals. Now, I mentioned those likely starters, those likely players from London clubs in the starting 11. There could also be a super sub as well, because Aggie Beaver-Jones has been scoring goals for fun for club and country. She's still only 21. She's scored 5 goals in her first 8 games for England, and that includes a hat-trick against Wembley at Portugal back in May. Only the 3rd woman ever to score a hat-trick at Wembley. So much to look forward to. England kick off on Saturday against France. Coming up right after us on BBC One, the host Switzerland against the host Switzerland are taking on 2-time winners Norway. Kick-off is 8 o'clock. Riz.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much. What a summer of sport it is. Thank you. Chris Legg there. Now to something you may love or loathe, and we see it all over the capital: graffiti. Whether it's a name tag or an elaborate mural on the side of a building. But the popular art form has become so mainstream in recent years that auction houses, museums and art shows now cater to it. My colleague Assad has been speaking to London artist Remy Ruff about his journey and spending time with Banksy.
Remy Ruff, you're a South Londoner who got into graffiti in the 1980s. When you got into it, could you ever imagine graffiti would become what it is today?
No, because I was a young teenager and I didn't really kind of envisage where it was going to go. But it's kind of a bit of a global phenomenon now.
And very quickly you became part of the iconoclast movement, which kind of took graffiti to a whole new level. How did it do that? What was different about it?
I think we didn't want to kind of mimic what was happening in New York. We wanted to kind of do our own thing and kind of find our Britishness and our own identities, and we were just quite experimental, I guess, and we just followed our own paths.
And it clearly worked, it was clearly popular. Is it when graffiti became art?
I mean, personally, I think graffiti's always been art. There's kind of different factions, but it is an art movement. It's the only art movement created by and taken forward by children in the history of all the art movements. So I think it's always been an art movement, but it's just how people perceive it.
Well, how people perceive it. Millions of pounds is spent every year to clear graffiti from public spaces, whether it be on the tubes, on the trains, outdoors. And it upsets a lot of people, it has to be said. What are your views about that? When does graffiti become menacing and when does it become art?
I think, there's a lot of different lines of where graffiti art actually is. And, what I do is graffiti art. It's not graffiti bombing or tagging. But it's still part of the whole culture. So, you know, respectfully, I kind of understand it, but it's not something that I do.
Now, among the greats you have worked with, as well as being a great yourself, is Banksy, the elusive Banksy. I have to ask this. Can you tell us anything about him?
His name's Banksy.
What's he like?
He's cool. We did a few walls together back in the very late 90s, early 2000s, when he moved to London from Bristol. Yeah.
That's all you're going to say?
I can't really say much more. I've always liked what he does, and I think his kind of comment on what's going on in the world is amazing, you know, and it's always joyful to see.
And future language of iconoclast, the book you've written, you've put together, who's it aimed at? Is it aimed at young graffiti artists? You know, who would you like?
I don't think it's necessarily aimed at graffiti artists. I think it's aimed at everyone. It's not a graffiti book. It's a book about friendships and how a group of young men found their voices in an art movement.
What's the future of graffiti looking like?
I mean, well, I think AI could play a big part, and you know, I'm very interested in tech and how that kind of changes moments in the art world. I think AI could be a really interesting asset to graffiti art in the future.
London artist Remy Ruff speaking to Assad there. Now, after years of feuds, Oasis have finally reunited for their UK tour, and later this month they'll be playing at Wembley. Well, one man who was right there at the start is BBC Radio London's Gary Crowley. He first met the Gallagher brothers, Noel and Liam, had to think for a second there, back in 1994 in a music shop on Denmark Street for their very first TV interview, and he's been reflecting on meeting them both back then.
What's it like being brothers in a band?
He's speechless, look at that.
I've got a vivid memory of Noel and Liam arriving. It just felt like a tornado had just blown in. They just both exuded this energy.
Hurrah!
You're listening to BBC Radio London, and it is Gary Crowley. Back in 1994, I got to interview Noel and Liam Gallagher in a guitar shop on Denmark Street for their first ever TV interview. 31 years later, I'm going to be looking back and also reflecting on how far they've come since that moment. A lot of bands didn't enjoy being interviewed. That's what it seemed to me. Maybe it was me, but the thing that was so refreshing was that they could not wait to see the red light on the camera.
We showed their video a good couple of months ago. They've wasted no time in releasing a new single, Shaker Maker, Noel and Liam from Oasis.
Right. Liam was like a squirrel on a washing line. He was here, there, he was everywhere. I've got a memory of him chatting the girls up on the TV crew. He was very, very charming.
No, my name's Noel, one of them things. I write all the songs.
Noel, it felt to me, kind of sort of written all the books about what you had to do to become a pop star.
When did you sort of realise that, you know, the sound was beginning to sort of gel and that, you know, you had something?
After about a year and a half, just wrote a couple of blinders. A couple of stonkers.
I quickly realised they were enjoying this. They were not shy, wilting flowers. These were young, working-class lads from an estate in Manchester. They wanted it all.
I'm after it all. I want to be a star.
When you say you want to be a star, I mean, you know,
I don't want to be like
star?
no, I don't want to be
a big star.
Yeah, the big, nice star, yeah. That's what I want to be. I want to be myself. Find it hard sometimes, but, you know, get there.
There's a couple of times when I'm looking at the crew behind the camera because everybody's got their hand over their mouth, trying not to laugh. I think what dawned on me was just what a double act.
What's it like being brothers in a band?
Mate, I think it's very, very funny.
I mean, if you row, what sort of things do you row about?
Everything.
I could lie and say when I watched that video that I foresaw Oasis were going to become one of the biggest bands in the world, but I didn't. Do you know what was interesting? I left that interview feeling better for having met them.
Hurrah!
And fabulous Gary is back on BBC Radio London this Saturday from 1, diving into all things Oasis. You can tune in or catch up on BBC Sounds. Now, just before we get to the weather, a quick look at the story of the peregrine falcons nesting at St Albans Cathedral that we and thousands of others have been following. They're 3 chicks, there are 3 of them there, hatched last month. They've now been tagged or ringed before they take flight. We did see them earlier eating. They're all 3 boys, by the way, but they're snuggled up and snoozing. And with that, let's get a check on the weather with Ben. Spot of rain for the gardens and a respite from the heat wave.
Yeah.
What else is in store?
Well, actually, it's going to stick a little bit cooler, certainly in the short term, Riz, and I suspect that will be a relief for some of us, particularly as we go through tonight. We actually saw a bit of cloud and rain this morning. By this afternoon, the sun came out, but the air turned much fresher, and what a difference a day makes. Yesterday, we were very close to 35 degrees. Today, those temperatures peaked at 25 degrees Celsius, and that fresher feel stays with us into tonight. So largely clear skies overhead, and my advice is to get the windows open, get some air through, because it is going to feel much, much fresher. Those temperatures dropping for some of us down into single digits. In the centre of London, 12 degrees. A couple of nights ago, it was 22 degrees all night long in the centre of London. So a much fresher feel to take us into tomorrow morning. This area of high pressure building its way in, so we are looking at plenty of dry weather. Quite a lot of sunshine around as well. We'll see a bit of patchy cloud developing as we go on through the day, but I think you would be very unlucky to catch a shower. Most places will stay dry, and in spite of quite a lot of sunshine, temperatures will again peak at around 25 degrees. So I suspect that will feel pleasantly warm for many of us. And whereas at Wimbledon today, we did see a little bit of rain through the morning. Tomorrow, I think we should be rain-free, some spells of sunshine, temperatures getting up to around 24 or 25 degrees. Now into Friday, we continue to see some spells of sunshine, but we will start to tap into some slightly warmer air again. We're not taking the temperatures back to where they were, but highs of 27, so yeah, that will feel pretty warm on Friday afternoon. Does the dry weather last into the weekend? Well, actually, no, it doesn't. This area of low pressure is going to push its way in. This frontal system coming southwards could bring some rain at times, but not all the time. So I think it's quite a mixed weekend in prospect, feeling cooler at 22 degrees. There are those signs that next week it'll start to turn warmer once again. Riz.
A mixed bag, as they say. Ben, thank you. And that's it. Thanks for watching. By the way, if you missed the superhero suspended above London yesterday, check out our Instagram or Facebook. It's been viewed by millions. Coverage of the start of the Women's Euros, as we mentioned, kicks off next here on BBC One. From all of us, enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.